Welcome back viewers, ladies, gentlemen, non-binaries and anyone with ears or other sound detection organs. Hope you enjoy. We are continuing with Going Native, written by Uncle Sealing. Going Native, Chapter 86. The scratch of a pencil on paper, someone shading a sketch. A light, airy voice singing to itself tunelessly. Dali Elinki heard these as she slowly floated up from the torpor of her medically induced rest. Her eyes felt glued shut by her long sleep, and as she tried to clear them with fumbling fingers, her voice croaked out in hope tinged with fear. "Dad." The pencil stopped and she felt a hand grasp at hers, squeezing firmly. A small and soft hand, delicate and warm. It trembled with the strength of the squeezing, but it wasn't nearly strong enough to hurt Dali. "Yes, my darling, it's me. I'm here." The light stung Dali's eyes and everything was blurry. She tried to focus on the shape of her father, leaning forward in the chair pulled so close to the bed that his knees were touching. Her brain was foggy, and he being here made no sense. She didn't think she would ever see him again. But Mom said her words died in her mouth as Flick Elinki, her father, came into focus. He was a little short for a male Shilvati, his body always a bit pudgy. Now, though, he seemed thinner. Leaner. Not skinny, but he had clearly lost weight in the months since he had run off. It looked unhealthy. That wasn't the worst thing, though. The worst was the mask. There appeared to be a piece of ceramic covering the right side of her father's face from cheek to forehead. It was bone white and decorated with a fine tracery of painted vines and flowers. Of course her dad would have painted it. There was no eye hole. "Dad. What happened to you?" Flick shook his head sadly. "That's not important. I'm just sorry I couldn't be there for you. I should have, I just..." A tear slipped down his lavender face from the one visible black and gold eye. Dali's free hand felt at her chest. She could feel the cushioned texture of a large bandage over her heart. The realization hurt Dali just as badly as the pistol shot had. If Dali ever met her mother again, she would kill the bitch. Merin and Ella stepped carefully, weapons up and at the ready as they moved through the Painter Observatory. The lights were all on and one of Commander REM's teams had already done a quick run through, but neither Marine was going to leave this to chance. Merin kept her assault laser on wide aperture. If anybody popped out, they were going to get hit with high-energy photons in a beam 20 centimeters wide. It wouldn't punch through armor like Ella's carbine would, but those malicious savages hadn't been wearing anything as nice as what the pair was wearing now, and her beam would very handily light any interlopers on fire. Merin thought it was fair. Between the pair, Samuel was kitted out in full battle armor. He was so small, Merin kept getting distracted. It was like seeing a little kid dressed up. His shoulder bag, overstuffed with pads and computing devices, completed the adorable look. Questing for great truths accompanied their human engineer. She wore no armor, but in her right hand, the mostly biological one, she held a long-barreled pistol with a strangely crenellated aperture. So far, nothing bad had happened. They were going to need a cleanup crew on the first floor before Sammy could enter the building. Merin didn't know if Shilvati blood would give her diminutive lover a panic attack like human blood did, but she wasn't about to chance it. Once Quest and Samuel were set up in the server room to do a physical inventory and check for any intrusions done during the militia raid, Merin finally had a chance to chat with Ella. The pair stood next to each other, an awkward tension slowly building between them until finally Ella broke the silence. "Fucking thing sucks." "Yeah. Quest was filling us in the whole time. Sitting up in orbit listening to everyone fight was." Merin shrugged. "I suppose I shouldn't complain. Nah, I get you. Like listening to intel while waiting for insertion. Knowing that you should be there and can't do anything about it as the situation gets worse. Ella grinned. Honestly, I'd rather be down here busting heads. Do we have a final tally of heads busted? Marin thought she probably shouldn't be so flippant, but it had been hours since the last shot was fired. If anybody was going to change columns on the injury chart, they'd have done it by now. No losses on our side. A lot of injuries, one of which was Vesper taking a shot to the spine meant for Gemsai. Word is confident he can get her walking again as soon as the tissue damage has had a time to settle down a little and he can get some synthetic nerve fiber prepped. A lot of Marines got glancing laser burns, a couple broken bones and dislocated joints from the hand-to-hand fighting, but all in all we gave a lot worse than we got. On their side. Marin found her lips turning up as Ella gave her a tusky grin. They dropped one captain, 32 militia women, and an XO. The interior came and picked up one captain and 8 militia women in various states of disrepair. 3 of those were the ones Keller and I caught, and 4 were the ones Quest trapped in an elevator. The last one. When Wasiro's message played, she dropped to the ground and put her hands over her head. Let everyone else fight it out around her. Smart. Ella thought about it. I'm not sure about that. I might take dying in a firefight over whatever Wasiro has planned. That's fair. Marin thought for a minute. What happened to their XO? Ella let out a quick bark of laughter. You mean, what happened to our XO? Well, good news. You get to keep your legs, assuming you can stay off them for the next few days. The animated eyes on Spreads the word through noble service turned into inverted U shapes as he smiled. It was cute. Pelik sighed in relief as she leaned back on one of the beds in the medical wing. The cleanup crews had been meticulous and there weren't any reminders of whatever horrors Word had inflicted on the militia here, which was good. Pelik could be surprisingly squeamish when the thrill of combat wore off. I do have to say, these are some remarkably interesting implants. A pity that using them puts so much strain on your body. I was told it's a side effect with how they are made. They grow the cloned limb around the hardware, so when it goes active it tends to shred the surrounding tissue. The whole system is pretty much single-use. Pelik probably shouldn't be talking about it, but the painkillers were quite good and the man was looking at her deep tissue medical scans. It's not like she could hide what she was given as part of the Empress's finest. And the organic tissue around it helps shield from casual detection. Very clever. Word tapped at a wall-mounted screen and a scan of her right arm came up, at least what was left of it. As for your arm grenade, I'm afraid the elbow and everything below it is scrap. Thankfully, we have a fairly nice set of 3D printers and machine shop facilities here so I can have a new non-explosive arm for you in a couple days. Then we just have to wait for the tissue to finish healing so we can attach it. Say a week or so until you can go back to whatever your secret spy types do. That thought made Pelik sober up. Shit, no way was she going to be able to blend in with a new prosthetic arm and video of her bastard slapping an XO to death going around. She had some important decisions in her future. Fully retire the way Keller had and let herself become a known quantity, or get a new face, a cloned arm, and start over. That would be, what, her 4th new face? 5th? Pelik didn't even remember what she used to look like anymore. Shit sucked. Maybe she'd be able to come up with something after a night's sleep. I want to see. Dali needed to see. She wanted to know exactly what her mother had done. And you're going to have to learn to live with disappointment. Flick smiled at his daughter, using a tissue to wipe the tears from his one visible eye. He lifted the mask slightly and tucked the tissue under it to catch the tears from the other side. At least Dali could take solace that there was probably another eye if it was able to cry. Can you at least tell me how bad it is? Under the mask. Flick nodded. Not so bad. They have just had some issues with the bone graft not taking properly, so now I need to get a lot of the work redone. I have an appointment next week with a specialist in a place called Los Angeles. A human, if you can believe it, but my doctor swore that he was the best cosmetic surgeon on the planet. He sighed. I should have said something, done. I don't know what. I always tried to protect you and your sisters from the worst of it. Darlie squeezed her father's hand tightly but not too tight. She could remember his good-natured complaining about her ruining his art career after her first growth spurt had greatly increased her hand's strength. It's not your fault. A little snort of amusement left Flick's nose. Here you are, comforting me when you're the one who got shot. That drew Darlie up short. She couldn't remember much aside from the burning sensation in her chest and the look of satisfaction on her mother's face. Then Eustace climbing on top of her and... How am I not dead? The nurse told me that a human basically held the hole in your heart shut with his fingertips. Laid on top of you for the entire flight to the hospital while the medics kept you topped up with new blood. He didn't let go until the surgeons were all set up. Darlie's father gave her a little wink. Kind of a cute story in a backwards sort of way. Dad. I know, you have that boy you like. At least let me tease you a bit. Darlie sniffed, then yanked her dad's arm. He squeaked as he fell forward and onto the bed with her, but still managed to hold out his arms and wrap up his daughter in a tight hug. Darlie wanted to keep her eyes open, but all she could see was the painted surface of the ceramic mask. Instead, she darted her eyes to the side and noticed something on the table next to the bed. It was a white card with printed text and, in the corner, a dark blue thumbprint. Her blood. When she read the card, she couldn't help but laugh. The tears came with the laughter, and when she showed the card to her father he had to start laughing too. Lone Caribou Survival Company. We keep you alive. Eustace Grant, owner. The grey sedan slid smoothly through the dark streets, empty in the early morning hours. The man known as DV to some, Dave to his few friends, let the steering wheel slide in his gloved hands as he pulled into the driveway of the small townhouse in the Denver suburbs. He turned off the electric motor and stepped from the vehicle. Dave's body language conveyed a calm nonchalance. He was supposed to be here, and anybody who glanced at him would be sure of it. He probably lived in this house. The key Dave slipped into the front door lock was a Samuel Forsyth special. The engineer referred to it as a lich key since a lich was far more powerful than a mere skeleton. Dave jiggled the key a couple times, letting the little mechanisms inside it bump and align the pins, and opened the door with a confident push. He could have picked the lock, but that might have looked suspicious. This was just a man putting a key in a door. The door slipped shut without a sound and Dave turned to the security panel to the right of the door frame. A little red light was blinking. He only had a few seconds before the alarm went off. Dave flicked down the keypad cover and examined the numbers. 0, 2, 3, and 7 were slightly more worn. He resisted the urge to roll his eyes. A single gloved finger tapped the keys. 0327. His target's ex-wife's birthday. Such an obvious choice. The panel let out a muted chirp and the flashing light turned green. Alarm disabled, Dave reached into his short jacket and pulled out a tightly vacuum-sealed bag. The fabric inside crinkled quietly as he unpacked. He pulled covers over his shoes, then stepped into a Tyvek coverall. The hood pulled over his head, covering his hair. Dave had worked petroleum jelly into his facial hair, eyebrows, and eyelashes before he came. That should help prevent any loose hairs from sneaking away. From another pocket Dave pulled a sheet of plastic that unfolded to become a face shield. Now properly attired, he could get his work done. There were several security cameras throughout the house, but Dave ignored them. Recording was likely disabled while the security system was turned off, and they weren't a concern in any case. He could see the faint red glow of the infrared LEDs that provided light for the sensor's night vision, which meant they might as well be blind. Another Sam special, the face paint Dave wore in strange geometric patterns was nearly completely transparent in the visible spectrum, but was highly reflective to infrared. To an onlooker, Dave's skin looked slightly oily; to a camera, his face glowed in such a high-contrast, bewildering pattern that there was no way to get anything useful from the image. As he ascended the carpeted steps to the second floor, Dave took a small cylinder of compressed gas from the bag. The needle valve let out a hiss as he opened it and stepped into the master bedroom. It was the same gas from the bar attack, the same one he had used on Chandler. A wonderful fast-acting paralytic that left very little evidence once it had dissipated. While he waited for it to fill the room, Dave took a moment for a very unprofessional frown. He was almost out of the stuff, and it really was useful. Now that the source had fled off-planet, he would have to see about finding a local chemical engineer who might be able to make it. The man known as Five was a side sleeper. It made the last step easy. Dave pulled down the covers, then carefully slid up the arm of the man's pajama top. The patch Dave stuck to the man looked like a nicotine patch right down to the company logo, but aside from nicotine it also featured a fast-acting and nearly untraceable neurotoxin. Dave put 2 fingers to the man's wrist and felt the heart attack happen. With the paralytic in his system, the man couldn't even thrash as his heart misfired, spasmed, and died. Dave left the patch in place, pulled down the corpse's sleeve, and pulled the blankets back up. Taking the patch was an option, but if somebody really wanted to look into it they might find the adhesive on his arm. The packs of cigarettes littering the place made it clear that Five had been a smoker, and a nicotine patch would be easily explained away. Dave casually worked his way back through the house, pausing to reset the alarm on his way out. As he pulled out of the driveway, Dave glanced at the center console. 3:42 a.m. He had pulled in at 3:31 a.m. He took a moment to sigh. Starting to get slow. Jelsai Chelza, investigator for the interior and all-around tough girl, lay stiff as a board on the bed, eyes wide open. She was sure she was going to be a wreck tomorrow, but she hadn't slept at all. The morning light was already starting to seep in through the window of the wood-paneled bedroom. She wanted to savor this moment. Once Dali was stable at the hospital, Nurse Joe was kind enough to loan the pair access to the staff shower and some disposable scrubs to wear. Stace had looked like something out of a bad horror film, covered in the Elenki girl's blood. Jelsai was hardly any better. Stace had started to shut down during the trip back to the Painter Research Institute. He stopped talking, just kind of zoned out and snuggled up tight against her. He wasn't sleeping, but she was starting to realize that Stace's laser focus in a crisis definitely came with serious drawbacks. Iing and Ellera had both been waiting for Stace in his apartment. Jelsai had gone to hand him off, but, as she turned, a warm hand grasped hers. Stace started stumbling off towards the bedroom, dragging a confused but unresisting Jelsai while Iing and Ellera grinned. On Jelsai's right, Stace was curled up against her, one arm across her chest and one leg draped over her thigh. On her left, Iing was similarly arrayed. Ellera, curled around Iing protectively, had an arm draped across and was gently holding Stace's hand where it rested on Jelsai's chest. They had all just stumbled into bed together, exhausted but needing the contact. And now Jelsai couldn't sleep. Her grin wouldn't let her, cheeks aching too much. This was awesome. End of chapter. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss any episode and do all the other YouTube stuff, visit and support the author, and I'll see you next time. If you didn't enjoy, comment on what I can do better. And as usual, have a wonderful day.